that you think you could run your favourite cricket team better than those who do. But no one is going to let you do that. So why not try Wicket Cricket Manager to satisfy that urge? Pick your nation, pick your league, pick your players, and yell at them when they do poorly. You can find it in the links below or by searching for Wicket Cricket Manager in your app store today. If you're enjoying these live chats, our main channel has even more World Cup videos looking at the greatest performances, the quirkiest stats, and the epic tales of World Cup cricket. Cricket is about partnerships, and this show was made in partnership with HCLTech. Yeah, the company you see on the Australian shirts. Supercharge your technology with them today. Morning, everyone, and welcome to the Scoreboard. Thank you again for joining us. Remember, if you want to chat to me after the main part of the show, the best way to do that is via Super Chats. But any interesting comments that I can read during the show, I'll try and get to, or anything I can answer. They may not even be interesting, but if I can answer them. But huge thanks to everyone. Please like, subscribe, do all those things. But let us get into the show because Sri Lanka actually started this game pretty well, right? They got 134 for 2 wickets, and I was doing something at that time, and I was trying to project in my head as I was sort of walking around. I think I had my iPad in front of me. I was trying to project in my head where they would go. And that was the point Akusul Mendes played the slog sweep against Mujeeb. From there, Sri Lanka, were they ever really in the game again after that shot? Their middle order didn't do much at all. The fact that they got a good total was down to Theekshana, who I don't think has ever made any runs in professional cricket really before this. They were just very, very limp, and they made a very, very poor score in the end. When Gabars went early, perhaps Sri Lanka had a slight chance for a little while there. But this new Afghanistan is one of the best chasing teams in the World Cup. South Africa should be taking notes from this, right? They go after a total like they are taking a walk through a park on a lovely spring afternoon, right? Sri Lanka dropped a couple of catches, but Afghanistan made it look like they were going to do this either way. So as we sit here right now, or you might be standing, Afghanistan has 3 times as many wins as their previous World Cup campaigns combined. Back-to-back wins as well. The only bad news they've got in this tournament is that they lost to Bangladesh, because at the moment, that game looks like it is between them and a certain semi-final chance. So they might have robbed themselves a little bit with how they went there. They were as bad as they could be in that last World Cup. And as it stands, we don't even know how good they could be in this one. 4 wins should be their floor, their absolute minimum from here on in. But 5, they could dare to dream. Let's check the tape and have a look at how it all went down. What have we got here? I think we start with their batting, don't we? We do start with their batting. Look at that. Everything going to plan. It feels like Afghanistan has been batting a lot better in this World Cup than we've seen of recent times. So, and I think me and Cheyenne both kind of thought this. So we looked it up, and they're pretty much exactly the same. And I was like, oh, maybe it's their top 3 or their top 4. And every way I looked it up, they were pretty much exactly the same in the cycle as they are now. So this is a really, really good sign, that it isn't massively boosted. I think I might have done this before the end. So it might have gone up. I think it was 28.5. It might have been 29 or 30 at the end. But either way, very, very close. And why this is a great sign for Afghanistan cricket is we've seen before that teams sometimes have a good World Cup, and everyone kind of remembers that they played well in that World Cup, and forgetting that for the 4 years prior to that, they didn't do anything all that special. But if you have a good World Cup like Afghanistan is currently having, and it matches how you'd been batting beforehand, that's really good, especially when it comes to average. Composure is a different thing, and I think they've certainly changed the way that they go about scoring, certainly in chases. Aaron Finch talked about it. There are many times that I've covered Afghanistan games, and I've covered them over 3 or 4 World Cups, I think now, where you're just like, they're going to lose wickets. They're not going to handle this situation particularly well. This new Afghanistan team bats very similar to how Sri Lanka bat, really. They kind of have one person up the top who can go a bit crazy, but everyone else probably bats a little bit slower than the top teams, but has the ability to average between 35 and 45, right, with the bat. And I think that when you're looking at it that way, I think they're doing really, really well. The way that they're batting so far, you would have to say that, South Africa would love to chase like them. And England would love to bat like that. But there was something else quite interesting about this innings here. So this was put up on the screen. They put this up quite a few times. This is something that it's not something that I've ever used as an analyst, but there are certainly batting coaches and analysts who do like to use this, where they map out a game. Generally, what I would do is probably something a little bit different, because I don't like the games to maybe come down quite as close as this particular one did. But you'll see that what the analyst has done is very similar to what I do. Never try and get to the chase in the 50th over. You should always try and chase games by the end of the 48th. And that's what you want your teams to be working towards when they're out in the middle. I know it's a silly psychological trick, but if you allow games to go to the final over, mad things can happen. So if you tell teams that it makes more sense for net run rate for them to chase it down to, I mean, in this case, I might have even said 45 overs, if we're being honest, and change some of those numbers a little bit, to do that. But you can see that they had it in their head that they wanted to score at a certain rate. But why this is interesting, and they mentioned this on the commentary, is that Afghanistan are playing like Jonathan Trot, which makes sense. He's their coach. And that's also quite funny because England would love to have the sort of runs that Jonathan Trot used to make for them, even at the pace Jonathan Trot used to make them. Now they'd be happy with those runs. And Jonathan Trot, for those of you who didn't watch him, I kind of accidentally started a hashtag called Trot's Fault, which was that when England would lose one-day games, he would make like 80 and he would be blamed for them losing the games. And there's an element of truth in it. In that he was batting quite slow. But at that period, he was the only one making runs. So it didn't actually make sense. It was a bit like the whole Shy Hope thing for the West Indies that we saw a couple of years back. But you watch them chase those last two games, and they are batting the way that Jonathan Trot would have been perfect for this kind of 242 chase. It was exactly the kind of innings that he was at his absolute best from. They followed the whiteboard. They followed the Trot method as much as you could. There was no doubt that this was a Trot's chase, that this is a Trot's team, and that part of their composure has to be Trot's fault. It's my favorite hashtag I ever created. Sadly, maybe we'd start using it positively.
Perfect delivery.
I once did a show with Trotty. And again, success he was told mid-show that I was the creator of that, and he didn't like that. He's not a man that understands irony perfectly. I've had some very weird moments with Jonathan Trot in my life, actually. That might be for another time. Talking about Afghanistan, though, I want to talk about Omarzai, a fantastically weird cricketer, just odd beyond belief, right? Let's start with his bowling. So this red mark here is all seam bowlers in the World Cup and the percentage of time that they bowl each length, right? So you can see that most of them bowl a lot more full and a lot more length than he does, and then he bowls a lot back of a length and also bowls a few extra bounces than everyone else. This is actually a pretty decent difference. You might be like, well, why are you showing us Omarzai's lengths? So for those of you who don't know, he's a batter who bowls a little bit, right? So I don't know he's less than a Baz the leader. He's maybe slightly more than a Marcus Stoinis at this point, as far as, where you're putting him on the amount of times you the game. And Marcus Stoinis, I bring him up for a very good reason. It's that in Stoinis's case, you have a bowler who doesn't bowl particularly fast, but bowls a lot of bounces and has decided that is his way. Well, Omarzai is like exactly the same, right? And he absolutely loves going in with all these bounces. And I wouldn't even say he's as natural a bowler as Stoinis is. He's got a little bit of, medium fast pace, but it's so random to watch him. And if it was just that he bowled short, that would kind of be a little bit odd, right? Because as I said, Stoinis does it, and we've seen other bowlers do it before. Who could forget Craig McMillan? That one's for the 90s kids. But why it's weird here is that they're basically trying to turn him into a frontline bowler at times, where they've been using him in positions where you wouldn't use a part-timer, like at the death. And he's currently got the worst economy rate of anyone at this tournament. And it's so bizarre because you watch him and you're just like, sometimes in some of those games, they had overs from their frontline seamers available to them, and he would still bowl. And he's not good. He's funny and he's interesting, but I'm not sure he's better than their frontline bowlers. I was actually shocked when I looked this up that his economy rate was this low, because every time I feel like I've seen him, he's getting absolutely smashed everywhere. He's just such a random player. But we're only talking about his bowling. Remember, he was involved in the chase as well. Well, here's another fun one for you. In his ODI batting career, he averages double the amount from spin that he does pace. Coming into this World Cup, in this World Cup at one stage, I think it was like 90 against spin and 13 against pace. But you can see definitely there he's got a problem. And I was like, and then I looked up the numbers. I think Cheyenne might have sent those through to me. And I was looking at the numbers and I was like, he doesn't have a problem against pace. He has a problem against left arm pace, right? He's fine against right arm seam. He's doing that's more than okay, especially for someone still making his way into cricket and everything else. But against left arm seam, he's absolutely terrible. And then he faces Madushanka today, and I think I looked this up just before the end of the game, and I don't know if he faced him anymore, but I think he'd scored 16 off 13 balls. He doesn't even follow his own patterns. He's such a remarkably odd cricketer, and I really want to see more of him. His bowling reminds me a little bit of, although it's different lengths, but a little bit of early Dan Christian's bowling, whereas like Dan Christian was essentially a medium pacer, right? And yet Dan Christian didn't seem to understand that he was a medium pacer. And Omarzai is exactly the same. And his batting, again, let's just bring the left armers on against him. And no, apparently he's not even going to follow that. Remarkably beautifully odd cricketer. Really enjoyed it. And he did really well in that chase today as well. I know we're having a bit of fun here because he is so bizarre, but good on him for going out there and playing as well as he did. And obviously him and his captain, who's played a couple of really good knocks in this World Cup now. I know a couple of people have asked him about him in the comments, so I might get to that afterwards, but fantastic as well. Let's have a look at their bowling. So I wanted to have a look at Rashid Khan. And I actually, earlier this tournament, I contacted some of my player friends and was asking them about Rashid Khan and why they thought he might have struggled against the best teams. And some of them admitted, a bit like me, that it could just be small sample size because they still thought he was really good. But they also said that as a batter in T20 cricket, if you can sit on Rashid Khan, not physically, but if you can be in a situation where you're not trying to score too quickly against Rashid Khan, and so then you're not giving him wicket taking opportunities, he will go searching for wickets. We've seen the way he bats, right? He's an aggressive guy. He's desperate to get wickets. He's not like someone like Mujeeb is happy to go at a low economy, although not so much in this tournament, but some of the other players are happy to go at low economies. Basically, Rashid doesn't want to be a Sunil Narayan type defensive bowler, right? And in the T20 players, it doesn't matter as much because people are coming at him. So even when you sit on him, you have to attack a little bit. Whereas in ODI cricket, you can really, really be quite defensive against him and wait for him to start doing that. And the better players milk him a little bit more, which means that sometimes he will attack even more with the ball, which means he ends up bowling worse. He is at his absolute best when he's dropping the ball here. So I've got pitch maps that I use in my analysis that I give to players, especially young spinners. So young spinners, you'll see they'll bowl a ball here, and they'll bowl a bunch of balls here, and they'll bowl a bunch of balls here, right? And especially to young wrist spinners, I'll say, this is the spot you want to be. You want to find your spot where your best ball can beat the outside edge if it turns away and hit the top of leg stump if it spins in. Right? It doesn't matter if you're a left arm spinner and your ball is here. You might be slightly fuller than him. You might be slightly shorter. Different bowlers are slightly different. But essentially, if every ball can land in the same place, what you then set up is a situation where if they're not picking you from the hand, they're in a lot of trouble. And Rashid Khan, at his absolute best, just does this. But at his worst, he can spray the ball. He can overpitch it. He can start looking for magic balls, pitching on middle and trying to hit the top of off and all. He's much better when he's pitching it right here, using that angle where he sometimes comes from a bit wide because of the way his body falls over and everything else. Why this was so hard. You see this ball here. This one hits, I think, the top of middle. But I can't remember if it was this one or this one, but it was one of the others. Actually, the wicketkeeper couldn't even take it because it took off from a length, spun the other way and bounced. So you've got one ball not taking off and ending up here and another ball ending up over here, but from the exact same line of length. That is what he does at his best. But let's just have a look at the ball because it's really good. Danajays De Silva, not had the best World Cup so far. Struggling quite a bit, isn't he? The only other thing I wanted to mention as well is I really think that, with this ball landing here, right, there's actually so many variations he can do. He has multiple variations of his wrong end and his leg spinner, but also you could see that this one, he comes quite close to the stumps, but then he falls down, and so it comes from wide. He can actually start to bowl from much wider on the stump if he wanted to as well. Like, he has a lot of flexibility there. Plus, he has changes in pace and everything else. How he holds the ball, he can get more variation out of landing the ball in the same spot over and over again than most bowlers could ever dream of. But let's just have a look at the ball, because it was quite good. But it's been interesting. He has bowled slightly better. We had some worries with him early on in the tournament, and he certainly fought back quite well. And he's looking like a threat again, and players aren't playing him the way they did at the start of the tournament. But we've got more spinners. In fact, there's quite a bit about spinners that we can talk about here. But one thing I wanted to talk about was Theekshana and Mujeeb. And the reason I want to talk about it is that these two bowlers are incredibly similar. And we'll go all the way through this as much as we can. But they are not off spinners. They are essentially carom ball bowlers. And not only are they carom ball bowlers, but their second ball for both of them is a wrong one as well. Theekshana probably bowls more off spin and probably has a better standard off spinner than Mujeeb does. But they're incredibly similar at what they do. They can both bowl in the power play. Theekshana is probably a little bit better, although not so much in this World Cup. Although we do know he's coming back from injury and missed the first game. This wrong-un from Mujeeb, it's just a beautiful delivery here. I'll just go back on that one for you again so you can have another look. Oh, right. Spins back, hits him dead in front. This was, I think this was his second wicket, wasn't it? After he got Mendes. We'll have a look at the Mendes one in a moment as well. But just, it's incredible that someone who bowls the wrong one as much as him and is so different to his other balls, and yet people don't pick it. And I was talking to someone recently, and they were explaining to me why that is. So that you can, and I know exactly, and this makes a lot of sense. I remember facing a bowler who only bowled wrong-uns once and didn't have a leg spinner. And it still took me forever because every time I couldn't pick the wrong-un out of his hand. It looked like a leg spinner coming out of his hand, but it spun the other way. And it was really hard for me the first few times I faced him to actually process in my head that every ball was going to be coming back in. And I wonder if Mujeeb has a little bit about that as well. And his other wicket was a little bit less sexy than this. Another wrong-un. Kusal Mendes tries to get this over deep mid wicket. This is the one that really changed the game, right? But, again, not that much to the delivery. What I like about Mujeeb's bowling, though, is because his wrong-un does have a lot of overspin on it. So you look at that sweep shot there. In fact, those two different wrong-uns, one spins back in and the other one has more overspin, which gives him almost two bites of the cherry. No, I'm assuming he's doing that on purpose, but it could just be natural variation. But, so one of them beats the inside part of the bat and the other one gets the top part of the bat. It's really good bowling from him. But let's have a look at the two bowlers now side by side. This is great work from the TV company. I don't know who came up with this idea, but this is fascinating. You can see here the two little fingers sticking up, the two little fingers. The actual hand position is slightly different between the two of them. And you can see that Mujeeb is losing way more of his height than he needs to lose here on this particular ball. It seems to be a weird thing with Afghanistani spinners that they all seem to drop their head so massively to the side. But you can see very, very similar between the two. Some subtle differences. This is a complete aside, but if you remember Ajanta Mendes, the reason that people started picking Ajanta Mendes was these two little fingers. And I don't know who the first player to pick it was, but I know the player who spread the rumor, and it was Ross Taylor, who noticed the two little fingers every time the ball was going in the other direction. And this is how long ago this was. They didn't WhatsApp each other. They BBM'd each other. Was it called BBM? Yeah, I think it was called BBM. They BBM'd each other. And so at that stage, it was the first time that information could be spread around cricketers really, really quickly, right? Because even text messages, international text messages used to cost you money. Cricketers weren't as much on email, obviously, because you need a computer for that. All that sort of stuff. Not the place that, but then it was before Wi-Fi was available everywhere, all those sorts of things. And when the BBMs first came in, it's really the first time that players started sharing information about different players when they went up against them. Anyway, it was these two things they were talking about. But you can see how similar these deliveries are. And this is their wrong ones. I think, because this one's a little bit more out of focus. I think there is a slight difference here, but these both look like, to me, what Abdul Qadir once called a finger wrongin, which is when you hold the ball more like that, whereas traditional leg spinner would hold it more like that. And it comes out, and what it means is that your fingers don't slow the ball down as much, so you don't lose as much pace. Because really good players, they don't just pick you by the angle of your wrist and the way the ball comes out of your hand, or even if they can pick the seam and which way it's spinning. They also will pick you by the pace of your wrongin. So if you're a leg spinner, generally most people bowl their wrongins a little bit slower, just because it has to come out over more fingers. The finger wrongin, I believe, is the one that does that. So they even have a similar kind of wrongin looking at this, and it's a bit hard to tell on one side, just because both their fingers are actually a bit blurry here. But I'm doing the best I can. But very interesting to me that both of these players are very, very similar. They're both called off spinners as well. And so, most of the databases that we have in cricket, if you look them up, you'll find them on as an off spinner. We don't really have a third, they are essentially a different kind of spinner. Again, you put them with a Junta Mendes or Jack Iverson, John Gleeson, those kinds of bowlers they're not finger spinners in the way that we traditionally call people finger spinners. And these guys have gone a step further. But Theekshana really struggling to take wickets. Still got the 3 wickets in this tournament, averaging 76, economy rate 5. You got Mujeeb, he's gone for a few more runs, but has managed to take wickets a couple of times. So the two similar bowlers here really are both struggling a little bit. I just want to point this out, that Ackerman and Glenn Phillips just absolutely tearing it up for part-timers. But you can see here, you got the sort of Muhammad Nami, Maxwell, and probably Mahdi Hassan Miraz as well. That sort of more defensive minded bowlers. Although he's going over 5s. England can't take a trick, can they? Anyway, we've talked about this before, that there are that off spinner hasn't done as well as perhaps we thought. But you have a look at this. There aren't that many specialist off spinners, and then some of the specialist off spinners are maybe not doing quite as well as you would want as well. Anyway. Let's get to Madushanka, because I think he deserves some credit. We've talked about him, I think, once or twice on the show already, but he's been absolutely brilliant with the new ball so far. He's still quite young. We know he has some issues later on at times. He doesn't have a lot to go to other than the big in-swinging Yorker at the start of the innings. But he does have the big in-swinging Yorker at the start of the innings. That's a fantastic ball. He slips it on a little but too. So we've got a couple of other, taller left-arm bowlers in this tournament. Even someone like David Willey, he's not quite at the Stark Janssen level or Shaheen Afridi level. But again, he's not a short guy. Madushanka, a little bit shorter, a little bit skiddier. Good skills. I want to see him continue to grow outside of that. But he's been fantastic in this tournament. And this is him. Marco Janssen has the most wickets by a left-arm bowler, by a human in the power play. And then Madushanka not too far away. And it's, just consistently, the ability to strike that he has shown so far. He's conceded 4.44 runs in this phase as well. So teams are not over-attacking him, or if they are, they're missing him a lot. Again, very, very good bowling. But it's just worth having a look at him overall. So this is his average phase-wise. This is the period. I think he might have got a wicket in this period today. He's going to prefer the new ball. It helps everything that he's doing. But this isn't too bad. He's still averaging 30 here. We're seeing he goes very early to the cross-seam deliveries. You probably want this average to be a little bit lower at the death. But there's something to work with here. It's not this and nothing else. And we sometimes see that. This is a guy who's brilliant with the new ball, can be handy in the middle, and probably needs to work on his death bowling a little bit. I'm not sure he has a great slow ball at this stage anyway. But yeah, fantastic by him in his first tournament. Certainly in a bowling attack that has not been particularly good. I'm just thinking, the bowling attack. I'll get to another point about Sri Lanka's bowling attack in a little while, but a bowling attack that has not been particularly good. He's been brilliant. All right, let us get to a run out that has really annoyed me. And unfortunately, I didn't get as many angles on this as I wanted. But let me bring this back for a second. So before we get to this, so this is Chimera, who is facing Rashid Khan here. So he's batting with Angelo Mathews at the other end. So there's a lot to unpack here. Chimera, I think he has an average in professional cricket of around 12. He's certainly not who you want to bat at number 6, but, you know, having enough trouble finding bowlers at this stage, you know, let alone someone who can do a little bit of batting talent. So, you know, they're going with that. You can see Angelo Mathews at the non-strikers end here. And this is the last ball of the 40th over. And I want you to remember that it's the last ball of the 40th over. And then Angelo Mathews is the batter at the other end. So Chimera gets a ball, defends it, doesn't move for a little bit, then looks up at Angelo Mathews, who I'm going to assume made the call. It's not very clear from this one, but I did see a side-on view at one stage. It did look to me that he looked up and he didn't call and that Mathews made the call. And then, of course, they run out. So let's just go back to this again. Look at the delay here. He hits the ball here. He hasn't moved. The ball's going off the point. He hasn't moved. He doesn't look like he's going to run. And then suddenly they run, right? Mathews, again, look at him backing up. He's not exactly tearing down the wicket. He's got his hand on his hip. Even after this has happened, I think we might get a little bit of a zoom out. He takes half a step when it's first hit. Then he pauses. Then they look up. It kind of looks like he's running, so they run, right? There's a bunch of reasons why this is horrible. First is, and this is the unlucky bit, if you see where the ball has gone here, it has gone almost dead square. When you're batting with a tail ender, there is no more dangerous place from the ball going dead square, because for most of you, you will know this, but in case you haven't played cricket, the person at the non-striker calls anything that goes behind square. So if it's behind the batting crease, the non-striker calls it. If it's in front of the batting crease, the striker calls it. Any ball that you're ever running with someone who's not a great runner between wicket, as most tail enders tend not to be, when it goes dead square, it causes confusion because both of you call, right? And this looks like it's almost run directly on the crease line. Like, it actually looks like it's bouncing on the crease there. Anyway, so the first problem there is that, and I think that has caused some of the issue here. The other one is, and let me just show you. Let me go forward. Okay. So the player that they have a slip in place, and then they have someone at backward point, right? So just behind the crease line, which means that when this ball comes out, it is going to be directly on their right hand. Not only is it going to be directly on their right hand, let me see if I can get this bit. When they throw it, they are going to pick the ball up on their right hand and look at the angle they have. They have, let's say, 2 stumps to aim at, maybe 2.5 stumps to aim at from that angle, right? So it's going on their right hand, which they throw with. And then they're seeing the full stumps and their ability to be able to do that, right? All of that is mistakes in this. And these things happen. That's absolutely fine. But let's just go back to one other thing that I said before that we need to go back to here. Chimera can't bat and doesn't have a very good record. This is the last ball of the over. And at the other end is one of the most experienced Sri Lankan players of all time who has been brought back for old man juice for this tournament, right? Batting at number 7, right? Why is he sprinting for a single off the last ball of the over to get Chimera back on strike? It's the 39th over. They've got 10 more overs to go. He should be taking as many balls as he can at this point. That run helps absolutely no one. It gets the tail ender back on strike, and it gets the top order player away from the strike. Why would you do any of this? It's just so maddening and baffling. And it looks like they almost both ran by accident. I don't understand this at all. Real mistake here by Angelo Mathews. He should have, once he saw that it was going into that zone, he either had to call it straight away or he had to just say no. I would have probably in that situation been like, no. I think he has his hand on his hip, partly because he is thinking to himself, I shouldn't be running for that particular one. I shouldn't be running for this ball unless it's a dead set, easy single. Anyway, people often talk about how people should rotate the strike better and everything else. There's a reason why the West Indians stopped rotating the strike, and it's because there is an inherent risk in those kinds of runs as well. Anyway, should we get to more bad things about Sri Lankan cricket? Apologies to all the Sri Lankans who are here for this one. But this is them bowling spin in this World Cup. I've had so many questions about if Pakistan is the worst spin bowling team in this World Cup. And let's be honest, doing some incredible work here. But they've taken 8 wickets. Sri Lanka's taken 5 wickets so far. Economy of 5.86. So all things considered, compared to Pakistan's 6.23. I think you can make a fairly solid argument that one of these teams is the worst team when it comes to spin bowling in this World Cup. Let's wait till the end of the World Cup to decide who is the worst. Things could happen. Remember that Sri Lanka doesn't have Hasaranga, and he would certainly help a lot in this. But they did have Welalage. They had a pretty good backup who is essentially unbowlable at this point in the tournament. Theekshana hasn't taken any wickets, as we talked about before. And to be fair to Pakistan, Shadab Khan is certainly not in best form. Not best physical fitness, as I showed in one of those earlier videos. But I think this is the thing that's most interesting about this. Yes, I showed you it, so we knew that Sri Lanka's been terrible. But it's so fascinating. So there are 3 Asian teams who have won the Cricket World Cup, right? India, who's Ashwin could have bowled more if they wanted him to as well. And, I'm not sure he would even improve their figures, but they would be even better at that. They've got 19 wickets with their spinners so far, an economy of 4, an average of 26. Just absolutely remarkable, all things considered. And then the other 2 teams that have won from Asia that have won the World Cups that are here. That on its own, the 2 worst bowling teams and the best bowling team, all from that 3-team pool is interesting. But then you've got Afghanistan, who are quite interesting. South Africa, who are quite interesting. But also that these teams have somehow just come together, right? And you've got 2 Asian sides. You've got an associate team in here. And then you've got the other major Senate countries all in here. This is maybe the most... I could do like a TED Talk on this. This is kind of a TED Talk, but I could do a TED Talk on this for how weird this is when you look at the history of cricket. This graph is one of the weirdest things I've ever seen, and it doesn't make any sense to me at all, and I love every single part of it. Anyway, Sri Lanka's been terrible. What else do I need to say? Theekshana was injured. I said that, didn't I? There we go. Let's leave that there. All right. This last thing has absolutely nothing to do with this game, but I put it up on Twitter and was shocked at how many people were surprised by this. But this is all based on Aaron Finch. So on the commentary, he said that he remembered Sanat Jayasuriya and Ramesh Kallu tearing it up in the 1996 World Cup. No one corrected him. It's a perfectly reasonable thing to say. We've heard people say it again and again in cricket, right? This is, I would say, though, cricket's Mandela effect. And not everyone knows what the Mandela effect is. But essentially, what the Mandela effect is that it's a phenomenon where a large section of people believe or misremember something that isn't actually true. And it just becomes something that everyone has. And it becomes this shared fact. But it's not a fact. It's completely wrong. There's some incredible ones. So it's named after Nelson Mandela because a lot of people thought Nelson Mandela was dead when he was alive, despite the fact he kept having public. I think he was still maybe a leader at that point as well. Like it was after he was out of jail. But a lot of people thought he died in jail. I don't know why, because it was kind of a big thing around the world when he got out of jail. There's also another one with, I want to say Sinbad, the comedian, who has a movie that everyone remembers watching when they were a kid that does not exist. And this is one where I even think, I remember that movie and it doesn't exist. There wasn't a movie with Sinbad in it. I think he was a genie or something in this movie. Anyway, so there's heaps of them. If you Google Mandela effect, you'll come up with some. You will probably have another one of these where you'll be like, oh God, I remember this. Anyway, Aaron Finch said that he remembers Ramesh Kallu scoring heaps of runs in that World Cup and tearing it up. He didn't score any runs in that World Cup. What the full story is, to explain it really well, and Kallu is one of my favorite players when I was a kid, so I was obsessed with him well before he started opening the ODI cricket. I remember when he made that 100 on debut in the Test match, and then came to Australia, and he just batted with such incredible freedom. Just like he could hit every ball for 4 if he wanted to. And so I was a huge fan of his. I even went and watched him bat in the nets when he was playing in the Boxing Day Test. I think he made 50 in that one, quite a quick 50 as well. And part of the reason that this is remembered is because he did get fast starts in this tournament. But as you could see, he only, I think he faced 52 balls in the entire tournament, I think, and he scored 73 runs. He made more runs in the following tournament where he wasn't particularly good. But it gets more fun because his strike rate in 1996 was 140. His strike rate in the next tournament was 70, right? But he did get a couple of innings where he would hit a couple of boundaries really early on in the first couple of overs, end up with this incredible strike rate, but then he'd go out straight away. And Sanath made some runs in that tournament, although he didn't have the kind of impact. The actual impact that people remember is from a tri-series beforehand when Kalu started batting with Sanath. And I might be even do a video on this because we've done a podcast on it for Double Century. And it's a really fascinating thing of how those two came together. But essentially, Sri Lanka ended up with two pinch hitters opening the batting together. And he made 2 scores against Australia and 1 score against the West Indies at the Wacker as well. And that was what really changed cricket forever. They didn't really score that quickly in the World Cup because one of them was always out so quickly. And Sanath played some good innings, but he was given player of the tournament, whereas actually Aravinda had a better tournament than him, probably, I'd say, by a distance. Anyway, the point is, it's a very interesting Mandela effect from cricket that when I put this tweet up, so many people were absolutely shocked that he only made 70 runs in this tournament. So there you go. Cricket's Mandela effect, or maybe, I don't know, Mandela's Kalu effect, if you want. That's it for the scoreboard part of this game. This game, I suppose. But we've got plenty more. There's some questions in. If you want to ask a question on Super Chat, please do. But if you've got an interesting one you want to put it in the chat, and I'll try and get to it. But first, let's have a break here, and while I look at and see what you guys have put in. But like, subscribe, do all the YouTubey stuff, and I'll be back in a moment. Have you ever wondered how I watch so much cricket? I use VPNs to log into accounts from all around the world. But because before, even simple things like when something exciting would happen in a match, I would rush over to social media, and when I got there, the clips would say something along the lines of, "This video is not available in your area." In fact, most of the coolest cricket stuff in the world at the moment is geo-blocked because some random board didn't sign a deal where you happen to live. If you're a hardcore cricket nerd, the only way is to have a VPN, and we suggest Surfshark. They will give you the speed of your favorite quick bowler. They're as inventive as a T20 batter after a bunch of dot balls, and they're as secure as a specialist wicketkeeper with the softest hands in the world. And guess what? The kind folks at Surfshark are going to give you a deal. Enter the promo code Kimber for an extra 3 months free at surfshark.deals/Kimber. There are probably other things that Surfshark can help you with, like data and identity theft and traceability and intrusive advertising. But for us, it is our best weapon against the evil cricket geo-block. Go to Surfshark and type my name in, KIMBER, and get 3 months free today. Welcome back to the Scoreboard. If you haven't seen our latest video on the main site, we have one on Mohammad Shami, and what a remarkably good striker he is in T20. What's his format? ODI cricket. And also we look at that spell against Stokes, which I thought was sensational. And tomorrow we'll have the power list up, which is, I suppose, a little bit redundant where the tournament is, but it was still fun. Anwish. Oh, wait, I'm going to make the screen bigger so I can read some of this. Anwish is Hashmad Shahidi, a Ravi Shastri-esque player. Limited talent, but makes the most of it. Nothing to show off at all in his batting. Still gets the job done. Can be said for the entire team. Well, I don't think it can be said for the entire team. Rashid Khan's pretty handy. No, I think he is. I think what you're really looking at is a limited player who has, of recent times, worked out how to make runs. Unless something drastically changes, he's probably never going to have a huge strike rate or anything like that. But he has the ability to average between, let's say, 35 and 42 in ODI cricket without taking too many risks, and being a bit of a backbone for that side. So I think, I didn't see Ravi Shastri in one-day cricket, so I don't, well, I did, but I don't have a memory as much of him. But yeah, he's, you see this a lot with limited players sometimes limited players are very good at just working out how to score in white ball cricket because it's not as hard, right? But you quite often do that with the slower strike rate. How good a player is Samuel Wickrama? List A record of 38.88. In ODI so far is 41.94. Looks technically good, but seems to lack the accelerating gear. Yeah, I think if you go back, we talked about this before the tournament. I can't remember if it was the podcast I did with Estelle. And Estelle is joining us actually on this network very soon. So thanks to her. But I can't remember if it was on the one with her or maybe one of the preview ones. They've got a lot of players who can make runs, but when they make runs, they don't make them particularly quick. I suppose we saw Kusal Mendes flip that on its head a little bit. But yeah, that's how I see him at the moment. I don't know how much. I'd have to go through his whole list A record. Remember, sometimes players, like, they have lower domestic records. People get really fixated on it. But it's because if you are an above average talent, you might have started at a really young age. And sometimes other players have really, really good first class and list A records. And that's because they start at an appropriate age. So you do have to factor all that in. I see nothing within his game that suggests he can't be a 40-90 player, which is handy, but not someone who moves the needle massively for you. But, considering they don't have great batting, that would be really, really good for them, I think. And we're said, England should be taking notes from Afghan batting performance today and versus Pakistan. As calm and calculated as could be, I'm still getting surprised every day. What a brilliant string of performances. Yeah, I mean, England don't want to win this way. And also, England don't have the bowling attack to do this, right? They don't have the bowlers that would allow them to restrict teams as consistently unless they get a lot of wickets up front. So England picked a style that worked for the kind of players they have. And it's not working at the moment because a lot of players are not in form and perhaps the age thing. They haven't played enough one-day cricket and blah, 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 blah. But there's a reason England was playing the way they do. This suits Afghanistan. If you go back and you have a look at a lot of the teams that had success with Rashid Khan in T20 cricket, they quite often bat very conservatively. And they do that on purpose because they know that they have a bit of a weapon the other way. And in this case, they, sometimes, they could even use more spin. I think they might play even more spin against Australia. And because they are a team that can attack and can take wickets at times and can certainly tie you up with their spin, it allows them to do that. Well, England don't have any of those things. So England shouldn't play like Afghanistan. Crazy says, what do you think about England possibly not qualifying for the Champions Trophy and whether the ICC will just put them in for financial benefit? The first thing that is important to say here is it would be very funny if they didn't qualify, and funny should always win. And if the ICC put them in for financial benefit, I would be very happy if that happens. And I'll tell you why. I've been telling everyone for a long time that this game is corrupt. And when I point out the very obvious reasons that cricket is corrupt, like the India-Pakistan game at every ICC event, people go, it helps cricket, it gets money and whatever. When you start to do things like this, do you remember when the Champions League existed? And in one year, Mumbai, I think it was Mumbai, but it was one of the IPL teams, had an extra overseas player. So they had 5 overseas players available to them. And they said it was because they had an injury to one of their local players who went off and played in another league domestically at that time. When you start to do stuff at that level, which is what this England would be, which is what the rain rule. I have no problem with having a rain reserve day for India, Pakistan, but you should have it for other teams as well in the Asia Cup, right? Once you go to this level, it's a corrupt system. You are no longer just saying that the best teams are going to go well. You're actually gerrymandering the entire competition, right? So if this happened, it would be how could they possibly explain it away? Right? They just have to be honest and just go, money matters more to us than cricket. Andy says, what is the benefit of a right armour going over the wicket to a lefty? Isn't it better to go around the wicket for LBWs? Also, what made was even special? Thank you for the super chat, Andy, and all the super chats, Andy, actually. What is the benefit of right armour going over? Well, it depends on what the right armour is skillful at. The right armour is skillful at bringing the ball back in, especially swinging it. It makes a lot more sense to bowl over the wicket than it does left arm. Than it does the other way, sorry. If they're not particularly skillful at coming around the wicket, so maybe they can move the ball away, but it's slightly more an angle thing that they're good at doing. When they come around the wicket, they'll just be bowling dead straight, and that won't work for them as well. They might not be able to get off the crease. Not all bowlers can move off the pitch, off the danger area of the pitch. And eventually, left-handers will get very used to everyone coming around the wicket, and a right armour will be able to. So coming over the wicket will be the rarer thing. And so it will make sense to do that. But I've done videos on this, Andy, if you want to go and have a look at why it happened and the changes and everything else. What made Wasim special? Well, we never had a left arm bowler that fast. Most left arm bowlers weren't particularly skillful. The last one that was skillful, or the last two that were skillful before him were Bruce Reid and Alan Davidson, two of the Aussies, and they had incredible records because no one could play them. So most left arm bowlers were kind of all they could do was swing the ball back early on, and then they had no other skill. They weren't generally that fast. Wasim Akram was fast, and he was skillful, and he could bowl over the wicket, and he could bowl around the wicket, and he could get conventional swing, and he could get reverse swing. He was very good at understanding what batters did, and he was very attacking. He was willing to go for runs to get wickets. So there's a lot, I suppose. Sab Yashisi says, should a team bowling first be awarded extra overs if the team batting first bowl them out? Surely New Zealand could have used those extra 4 balls. It's an interesting one. No, because I like what we've done in limited overs cricket. It's very different to Test. Is we've essentially turned it into a possession game, a bit like basketball or netball, where you know that one team's going to have 50% of the ball and the other team's going to have 50% of the ball, and it is what you do with it. So it's about how good you handle your allocated resources that you know going in. The other problem with this could be that you could have situations where, I don't know, a team makes 220 batting first, but they're bowled out in the 30th over. And then the other team, the bowlers have to bowl a lot more. And you're suddenly putting a lot more stress on bowlers, which, bowlers are not going to be happy with. And I'm not sure it improves the game. Amont says, what do you think of this World Cup in the future, swapping to the T20 format and still carry on the legacy? They have the T20 World Cup with its own legacy, swap this World Cup. Well, so have 2 World Cups that are T20. So I can tell you what is going to happen very soon. At the moment, the 50 over World Cup makes a lot more money than the T20 World Cup. The broadcasters believe within the next cycle that will change. And once that changes, one-day cricket is probably gone. And certainly bilateral cricket is the one that is going to be in the biggest danger. Maybe they'll go on with 50 over World Cups, not that much longer. I don't think we need 2 T20 World Cups in a cycle, especially if we're going to have T20 in the Olympics. I think that kind of isn't necessary. But I've got no problem with other tournaments. But I think there are ways to fix one-day cricket, keep it more relevant. I've done a whole video on that, Armand, if you want to go and check it out. Kanishk says, how would you fix Australia's middle overs woes realistically? I feel that if they solve that, they can be better than India on a day. I think they could be better than India on a day anyway, but they may not be. I don't think they have the team to really fix that. I like the idea of using Mitchell Starc as an innings eater in the middle overs occasionally against spin. I think he plays spin better than some of the top order players. Perhaps you get a good off spinner against him, but there's a few guys who will spin the ball back into him who he can attack. I may have suggested that to the Australian team. I'm not sure they thought that was as good an idea. Inglis and Maxwell and Smith, I suppose, in that middle order is the other way of doing it. But, they came in not playing spin very well, and they're not playing spin very well. I don't know how you fix that, really. Soham says, Mandela effect is famous for the horror aficionados amongst us. First super chat from me, by the way. Well, thank you for bringing up first super chat and bringing up the Mandela effect. So big fan. Can Afghanistan take down Australia and upset at Wankhede? It's probably the wrong surface for them, isn't it, that ground? I haven't looked at the numbers this tournament, so I don't know if that's the case. But, what I know of the IPL and traditionally, it's probably not where you want to play Australia if you're Afghanistan. I say just go in with an extra spinner. Make Omarzai bowl because they have at times, so they might as well continue with that. I'd see how they go. Take as many spinners in and see what you can do is probably their best bet. But Australia should beat them in that game. But I think Afghanistan, I think they'd be confident, right? I always felt that it's a really interesting matchup. It's not quite this way, but when they used to play each other, so Afghanistan were known as the bullies of associate cricket. And then they got to the major level of cricket, and Australia showed them what bullies are actually like 2015. And that shook Afghanistan a little bit. But so many of their players have played in Australia now. And I feel like they're a better and more rounded side now. I thank you for the super chat, though, Soham. Sahil says, how do you fancy Pakistan's chances as they have one match against New Zealand, and New Zealand can very much lose to South Africa? I don't know how Pakistan, unless I think New Zealand have 2 games. So they've got South Africa, and they've got Sri Lanka, and they've got Pakistan. So 3 games, sorry. The South Africa one, let's say that's a coin toss, right? Which I think is fair. The other 2 games, I would say, based on everything I've seen of Sri Lanka and Pakistan, if the left arm seamers in both those sides don't take an absolute fucking shit ton of wickets up top, I do not see how either of those teams can beat New Zealand. As the current form, the way they're constructed and everything else. Things can change, and someone can play incredible innings for Pakistan and they can make a lot of runs and chip away and everything else. But I think New Zealand is one of those teams you have to take wickets against. Like most teams in this World Cup at the moment, and most of the best teams. And I don't know how Pakistan take those wickets with the lineup that they currently have. That was Sahil, wasn't it? So that means we have Orville, who says Rangers or D-backs who will win the World Series. I haven't even thought about it yet. I tell you what, Orville, Denver Nuggets are up 3-0, so I put all my time into the NBA, trying to watch the basketball while doing my writing at night. Although I saw Nuggets last night, I saw that game live while I was writing the chamois piece. Wow, they look incredible. But yeah, I haven't looked at the Rangers or Diamondbacks, so I have no idea. But I'm sure I will probably get sucked into some of that at some stage as well. But thank you very much for the super chat. RR says, India and New Zealand was the most watched. India, Pakistan is history. India, Pakistan is not history. Our numbers on this site suggest completely the opposite of that. Do you really think in the future that India and New Zealand is going to be like a consistent high ranker, or it was one particular game at one particular time? It could have been the way that the games went. It could have been the point of the tournament that it was happening or anything else. But there is no way that India, Pakistan is history. The hype around those games, if nothing else. But it doesn't mean that every tournament, India, Pakistan is going to be the highest rating game. I think, and I don't know if your numbers are correct. I haven't looked that up. But that's not what it means. It means that the way that the broadcast cycle works is that they want a certain amount of India-Pakistan games to go up. Also, India want to play Pakistan, and obviously Pakistan are desperate to play India, and the only time they get to play each other is at these tournaments. If Pakistan were a better side, if Pakistan were in that game, if you had the same game in both ways, all these sorts of things. But India-Pakistan is not history. I mean, that's just, come on now. What are we doing? Let's say there have been times when the ratings haven't been as high for that game. Do you really think that means it's over? Like, this is a rivalry that's going to go for ages. We still talk about it. England, Australia. That's a really high rating game, right? Talk about a history that should be over. These things don't die, right? And if it looks like dying, then India and Pakistan should be getting together to work out what they can do to reamp it back up, because it's a very important game for all of cricket, but also those 2 particular nations, because it gives them it solidifies India's power at the top, that game. But it also gives Pakistan a lot more importance than they would have without that game, right? Without that game, the way that Bangladesh is going, is Bangladesh not maybe a more financially viable market into the future? Doesn't have the history of Pakistan or anything else, but maybe they get a couple of stars that come through and everything else. Like Pakistan, as much as they're great, we've seen what has happened, have been great in their history. We've seen what happens to the West Indies. You have to stay viable. That game is going to be important for probably all of your life, unless something politically changes. And even then, if it politically changes, as I said, England, Australia, the political landscape completely changed, and that's still an important game. Australia, New Zealand, still a very well-watched game, right? These things don't die because of one bad rating, even if your ratings are right. Anyway, I'm going to call it there today. Thank you to everyone for to Soham, Orville, RR, Andy. Is that all the super chats? Yeah, that was all the super chats, but also to everyone else. All comments are really helpful to us. They help the algorithm and everything else. If you're not subscribed by now, please subscribe. Helps us with sponsors. And, this World Cup, this channel is absolutely flying. But after this World Cup, we go back to podcasts and everything else. There'll be plenty of interesting stuff. And your subscribing, even if you don't watch all the videos, is still really, really important to us. Go and watch a Muhammad Shami video if you haven't seen it. And power lists tomorrow. Yay. But also in 50 minutes, I might have to move it back slightly, but in 50 minutes, we'll be doing Uncovered podcast with me and Bayram as well. So if this is literally not enough of me, and I can't see how that is possible, but for some of you, it might be true, I will be back in a little while to do another podcast. So a huge thanks to everyone in the chat again today. And I'll see you again tomorrow for that game, of which I cannot even remember what it is, but it's the most important game ever. And I'm really excited by it. And I can't wait for it to happen. But thank you to everyone for chipping in. I'll see you again tomorrow. This video is brought to you by Wicket Cricket Manager. If you're enjoying these live chats, our main channel has even more World Cup videos looking at the greatest performances, the quirkiest stats, and the epic tales of World Cup cricket. This show was made by HCLTech, a company that believes in partnership so much you can read their name on the Australian shirt. This show leans in hard on data and technology, so we are proud to work with HCLTech, leaders in their field.